This episode is brought to you by the Mandel Institute for Nonprofit Leadership. Do you ever wish you had more time to think about the why behind your work? Whether you're innovating new approaches to Jewish education from the outside, or you're working within long-standing institutions, the Mandel Educational Leadership Program invites you to rejuvenate, expand your thinking, and consider your work within the broader ecosystem of Jewish education. What begins with 4 in-person seminars alongside a cohort of thoughtful peers evolves into a lifelong community of inquiry and experimentation. Learn more at mandelinstitute.org/unbound and apply by September 24th. This is Judaism Unbound, episode 546, Worlds to Come. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lex Rofberg.
And I'm Rita Yehuda Newman.
And today we are thrilled to be joined by our guest, Lexi Kohanski, who is the creator of a new tabletop role-playing game called Worlds to Come. It is anchored in Jewish experience and in Jewish time travel. You can learn more about it by heading to the Kickstarter for Worlds to Come. The link to that is in our show notes. But also important to know about Lexi Kohanski is that she is a new member of the Judaism Unbound staff team. She has joined us recently and is already making a wonderful, wonderful impact on our work in all sorts of ways. So we are grateful to Lexi Kohanski for being not only a guest on this podcast, but in many ways, not a guest, but actually part of the Judaism Unboundiverse as a member of our staff team. She is also a returner to the podcast because in her previous role at the Torah Studio, she was part of Apocryphest, our annual Hanukkah extravaganza, along with Liana Wertman. So if you're hearing that name and you're like, I recognize it, that is potentially why. Basically, Lexi Kohanski is super, super cool. And this episode will be another chance to get to know the wildness, the radicalness, the awesomeness of her Jewish mind and heart. So we aren't going to say too much about Worlds to Come, this amazing Jewish tabletop role-playing game in the intro, because we're going to dive into that in just a few moments with Lexi herself. But because that is such an exciting thing for us to be doing today, we want to get to that amazing conversation. And in order to do so, that means we have to give this week's Judaism Unbouncements, or should I say we get to give this week's Judaism Unbouncements. First off, we have amazing courses in the Yeshiva that you can register for, 3-week mini courses that are going to be beginning in just a couple weeks. And you can sign up for those by heading to judaismunbound.com/classes. There are amazing options featuring teachers Lainey Solomon, Chava de Cordova, and Alicia Jo Rabins. So don't miss them. Head to judaismunbound.com/classes to learn more. And of course, as always, financial aid is available for all of our Yeshiva classes. Another note, if you're listening to this the first couple days that the episode has come out, you should mark your calendar for August 2nd and go to our graduation ceremony for students in the Yeshiva certificate program in Unbound Judaism. You can register by heading to judaismunbound.com/certificate and clicking the big button. We will be marking the magic that is 8 new graduates from our certificate program. This is a really momentous occasion, not only for them, but for our organization generally. So if you have appreciated our work in any respect, we hope that you will come and celebrate these new ambassadors of Judaism Unbound's work. We will hear from each of the graduates. We'll shower them with the praise and love that they deserve, and we'll look forward into the future where they'll be bringing their unbound Jewish gifts to the world. So don't miss it. Again, that's Sunday, August 2nd. It's at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And now we will give you a little bit more background info on Lexi Kohanski. She is a trans Jewish writer and educator who focuses on empowering those who have not felt at home in Judaism. Her writing has appeared in Gashmias magazine, Life is a Sacred Text, and the Trans Halacha Project, and she regularly publishes through the T for Torah Patreon. Lexi is the author of Worlds to Come, a first-of-its-kind tabletop role-playing game for learning Hebrew. Before entering the world of Jewish education, Lexi was an actor, a teacher of English as a second language, and a farmer. She is a rabbinical student at Yashrut and has also studied at the conservative yeshiva, Pardes, Svara, Hadar, and Yeshivat Maharat. In 2025, she won the Pomegranate Prize, an award granted by the Covenant Foundation for her efforts to expand Who Gets to Learn Torah. Lexi Kohanski, welcome back to the Judaism Unbound podcast, and welcome aboard our Judaism Unbound staff team.
Thank you so much.
Well, we are really excited both to talk with you and to experiment and play a little bit of this game you've created with you. But to start things out, before we get super specific into the ins and outs of your incredible tabletop role-playing game, I'd love to ask just like, what's the problem you're solving, or what are the problems, plural, that you're solving? Why, when you were doing your work as a Jewish educator in all sorts of different ways, why, when you looked out and asked, what should I be pouring my heart and soul into for a few years, did you land on creative, wild, experimental tabletop role-playing game for teaching Hebrew? What's the backstory there?
First of all, pouring my heart and soul into this is exactly the right phrase. Every single part of me has gone into this game as an educator, as a gaming nerd, as someone who loves languages, magic, and fantasy. It is truly all in Worlds to Come. And the problems with Jewish education, with Hebrew education in particular, that I was seeing out in the world are so many. And I am sure, like, anyone who's listening to this podcast who's ever been to Hebrew school as a kid, or tried to access Hebrew education as an adult, or even just tried to like go to synagogue and engage in Jewish communal life, and suddenly everyone's speaking a language and reading a book that you cannot access. I think the problems are obvious to anyone who's trying to engage in Jewish life with Hebrew education and where our institutions are failing. You know, I personally went to Jewish day school, meaning like that was the whole school I went to 5 days a week, full time. And there were Hebrew classes I took for 7 years. After that, basically a year after that, I forgot everything. I could barely even read Hebrew. Like, what? Something is wrong there. Hebrew school, it's a struggle to get kids to pay attention, to be invested. And the teachers aren't having a good time teaching like that either. You know, if you're an adult trying to access Hebrew education, not that you need this to be a Jew, not at all, but if you want to learn Hebrew as an adult, and you are not able to like uproot your life and go study in yeshiva, probably in a different country for a year, there's very little out there for you to be able to get that Hebrew education. Although I will shout out a couple places that are doing it really well. There's Tamar Kamyankowski's online Beit Midrash. There's Helen Plotkin's Makom Torah. They're doing really cool stuff. But it's hard to get into, and if a traditional language class isn't going to work for you, there really is very little. On the teacher side, if it's a struggle for kids, if it's a struggle for the students who are in the class, it's a struggle for the teacher, and it's not fun. I was an English as a second language teacher for a number of years after I graduated college, and I left that for Jewish education because it wasn't engaging people's full selves in the way that I want to be doing as an educator. And Worlds to Come doesn't just teach Hebrew. Worlds to Come lets you explore what being a Jew means through the power of Hebrew language and Jewish history. So we're never just doing Hebrew education isolated in a box. We're doing it as our full engaged selves. And that, I think, is a key part to that retention problem that I was talking about. You forget it after a couple of years because it means nothing to you. So we have to teach Hebrew as the ancient language of power and creation that it, in fact, is. Partly because that is the truth of what's happening, and partly because that's just good pedagogy. That's what will actually get people to be invested.
I love that you're thinking so much, not just about how do we do language learning, but like, why do we do language learning? Why does it matter to us? And what role might that actually play in terms of our ability to actually retain that language? Because I consider myself to be among the luckier American Jews who got some biblical Hebrew education as a child. And so I don't have to necessarily relearn that quite from scratch, but I was still also doing Hebrew school after school, and it was always taught as this is a lead up to my B'nai Mitzvah. And then after that, there was no other application about why I would possibly want to learn biblical Hebrew. And so it really did, much like you described, kind of went in one ear and out the other. And as an adult, as I've wanted to become more Jewishly engaged, as I've wanted to have different experiences in terms of learning, in terms of prayer, I found myself at a real loss as a young adult trying to re-enter into a language that I had these impressions of, but it really didn't stick. It's such an interesting premise here about why is it that it goes in one ear out the other for so many people has to do with the fact that maybe it's because we don't understand what our relationship to the language is. What's so cool about Worlds to Come is that you're saying play might actually be a pedagogical solution in terms of meaning making. And so I wanted to ask you, what is the role of play in language acquisition, and what is the role of play in Jewish relationships to biblical Hebrew? Why does play matter?
I think about that all the time. I think about it so much, I wrote a whole article about why play is the way to teach biblical Hebrew.
Which we'll put in the show notes.
That's right. Worlds to Come is a tabletop role-playing game. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's like Dungeons and Dragons you may have heard of. There's a whole wild world out there of TTRPGs. And the way you play one of these games is you get a group of friends or a teacher and some students together, and you sit around a table. And with the support of the rules in the book and maybe some dice and maybe some little props, you tell a story together. It's a shared fantasy. And as you tell these stories, maybe most of the players at the table are taking on the role of a single character in Worlds to Come. That is the role of a miracle worker who's been chosen by our holy tongue, by the Hebrew language, to repair the world in the wake of the destruction of the Second Temple. And then one of the other players, maybe the teacher at the table, the arrayer of worlds, as it's called in Worlds to Come. Other games might call it the dungeon master, the game master. The arrayer of worlds portrays the rest of the world, the Romans, the Jews, the demons, the literal demons who will oppose the players' attempts to make miracles happen. And as you tell these stories together, what you're doing is you're talking to each other. You're using language to communicate. And it sounds kind of silly to put it that way, but when we're thinking about language learning, the holy grail of language learning, what actually gets a person to what we call in the business acquire the language, as opposed to like knowing facts about the language, but what's actually going to make it so that you can use this language to do the things that you want to do, like in real life. And for Hebrew, classical Hebrew, what you want to do is like go to synagogue or be in your own home and like pray to the creator of the universe. You want to talk to Hashem. You want to talk to the divine spirit that underlies all things. So if you want to learn Hebrew, you got to do that action over and over again and receive kind of a feedback loop of like, I'm talking to God and God's talking back to me and we're doing it in Hebrew and it feels good. I feel like I'm being understood and I feel like I'm understanding what's being said to me. That's our theory for how language learning works. It's called the communicative approach, if you want to Google it and learn more. You know, in the course of our daily lives, we're mostly not speaking classical Hebrew to each other. That doesn't exist anymore. So a game like Worlds to Come that puts you in the position of, I want to talk to these other people at the table in our ancestral language of prayer. The way you work a miracle is by composing a Hebrew prayer. You're supported in doing that by the game through drawing from a deck of cards that have Hebrew knowledge on them. It's called the Deck of Creation, beautifully illustrated by none other than Rita Yehuda Newman, who I'm speaking to right now on the podcast. You draw from this deck, you put your Hebrew prayer together, and then you say it to the other people at the table. They interpret it for you and decide what the miracle is going to be. The array of worlds, that game master, that teacher is going to play demons who oppose and present devilish, demonic interpretations. Literally debate for the sake of heaven, as it happens in this game. And as you're fighting over these words and what they mean, and using them to actually change the world that you're conjuring together through your words, you're learning Hebrew. You're getting across meaning that matters to you in what we call the target language. And every single time you do that, that is a magical feeling. That is, I spoke and created an idea, created a feeling in your minds, and you reflect that back to me. That feels good. That's like a very spiritual way of saying that's just how language learning happens. When you do that in a traditional classroom, you probably don't care about the Hebrew that you're saying. You're like, well, David walked to Jerusalem and entered the field. Like, I don't care about any of that. But when I'm like, I am a miracle worker trying to stop this Roman from like imprisoning a Jewish rebel, and I'm gonna like use Hebrew to stop that from happening, I'm really invested. And when I know like whatever I say is gonna be opposed by Ashmedai, king of the demons, so I really better get it right, I'm really gonna care about what it is that I'm about to say. And the truth is, like at the table, I've seen everyone from like rabbinical students at like JTS and Hebrew college to like 13-year-old teenagers almost get into fights with each other about like, make sure what is the correct grammatical form of that verb you're about to use, because if you don't use the right one, Ashmedai is going to screw us over. And like, you're never going to find 13-year-olds choosing to have a conversation with each other about the correct Hebrew grammar forms in any classroom I've ever been in. But with this game, it just happens so easily.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think in a lot of contexts, pedagogically, a lot of work happens, I'm going to say, in the white fire. That's like a reference to a certain idea of what Torah is, where there's the black fire, the written ink on the page, like the actual words. And then there's the white fire, which is in between the lines. It's the context of the page, right? And this game makes the Hebrew learning the white fire. It makes it the implicate. I mean, it is also part of the black fire. It's part of the explicit thing. But it makes it just sort of what's whirling around you as you're experiencing a fun game. Like that's what you are doing primarily. But I want to start for a second in a way that I think will sound like I'm disagreeing with you, but I don't think I really am. So no part of why I learned Hebrew personally, and I'm not denying this of others, no part of it is about talking to God. Just 0%. Like my conception of what God is not something I could talk to. So that's not what I'm looking to do. And I heard really beautifully how, if it is what you're doing, this game lends itself to sort of learning Hebrew and applying it to that function. I'm curious, what is this game for folks who are excited about Hebrew for other reasons, for whom it's not about speaking to a God figure, whether they're atheists or maybe they're still theists, but like that's just not the version of Jewish practice that they're looking to do. I grew up with this aphorism that I've quoted over and over again, which is at summer camp during services. In our prayer book, there was a little reading that said, Jews go to synagogue for all sorts of reasons. Many go to talk to God. I go to talk to Garfinkel. That was the name. I don't know why it was Garfinkel, but like the fun part is it's a last name, so it's not gendered as a story. But literally that was said in our prayer services. And I think there's a general understanding that part of what's magic about Jewish practice and even about spiritual Jewish life is that we're not only sort of communicating with God. So I guess I wanted to hear from you, like, for people who heard what you said before and are like, I'm not that much of a talk to God person, what is this game for them?
I really appreciate you bringing that other angle in, because that's definitely what I use Hebrew for. I personally use Hebrew to talk to God. But what's happening at the table is actually really open to interpretation. The game's kind of core claim is that what your character, what a person believes in their heart, what the true words that guide them are, shapes the world. Whether you think that happens through you talking to God or not, the game puts you in a scenario where the story is you're praying to angels, and then angels and demons fight over the words you use, and then something magical happens. But again, the game is also set in a fantasy world where there's also like Roman magicians, and there are golems and shamirs and all sorts of magical, mystical, Jewish and other creatures and deities happen, like, meaning it's not a historical reenactment. The game invites you to imagine an ancient world where like misogyny and transphobia and queerphobia and ableism do not have to be getting in the way of what a person can do. And we can imagine that world together. Like if we can imagine like spirits and Shadim and all sorts of like Zeus, Jupiter all existing, like why can't we imagine a world where like women can be rabbis? Like come on, that should be an easy one. The game tells you you're using Hebrew to pray to heaven and something miraculous will happen. But what's actually happening at the table is you're speaking Hebrew to other human beings who are trying to construct a story and construct a world together. And if that's not what we're using Hebrew to do in our actual lives with Judaism, is to use Hebrew to build a better world together, to bring the world we want to see into being, the world to come, touch your nose, that's the title of the game. That's what we're doing with Judaism, whether you think God is part of the picture or not. We human beings at the table in community together are building the world. And the game is saying Hebrew can help you do that.
When we think about Genesis, God spoke and the world was, the game comes from this premise that the words that we say create the worlds that we exist in. One of the things that I really want to highlight about this game is the way that it is not historical reenactment, but historical reimagination. That it's such a cool landscape to get to explore. And when I'm thinking also about my experience learning ancient languages, I have a background, as I said, in biblical Hebrew because I went to Hebrew school and sort of failingly learned bits and pieces of the language from pretty unenthusiastic, but, earnest educators. But I also learned Latin. I was a kid who took Latin classes from like 6th grade until the end of high school, and I was very passionate about it. I loved reading Virgil. I loved getting to read about Roman history, and my association with the language was so live that I've actually retained a lot of Latin because it transported me into a world that was lost. For anybody out there who has taken Latin, or for our listeners who haven't, a lot of Latin language pedagogy is also about learning the historical context of a language because it's no longer spoken. And one of the things I find so beautiful about the concept behind Worlds to Come is it's a time traveling game. It's about understanding that we can do this kind of Jewish time travel to different worlds that have previously existed and into worlds that may not yet exist or may not have existed, but are interacting with worlds that potentially did through the power of imagination, through the power of collaboration with our fellow game players, that we can rediscover things that were lost in time. I often talk on the podcast about the palimpsest of different eras that all shape Judaism. So a palimpsest is a historical term for a manuscript often written on vellum, much like Torah, where because paper wasn't super available, you would scrape off the letters, you would scrape off the ink in order to have a new blank sheet. But you can actually carbon date a manuscript that has different letters from different times, and you can actually see multiple layers of writing. And so a landscape can be like a palimpsest, and Judaism itself is a lot like a palimpsest. This game is a way of playing inside of the palimpsest of Judaism through the lens of language in a way that I find so beautiful. And Lexi, I had the honor, since you invited me to illustrate the game, it's been such an honor to get to interact not only with the universe of Worlds to Come in a linguistic sense, but also in a visual sense. Language is so emotional and it conjures up such an imagination. And one of the things that we were really contemplating when we were thinking about what does it mean to design images for this game is there is no clear-cut Jews in ancient Palestine after the destruction of the temple aesthetic. Right? There aren't like fonts that scream that thing, right? There aren't objects that like obviously help us cue into like, this is the time and place that we are. There aren't really color schemes. So putting together visuals for this game became kind of a question about what else are we grabbing from? And what is the way that through Worlds to Come, through language, we're actually able to imagine other worlds previously and to actually help build out the different question marks or the omissions that were lost to time. Because actually that's the nature of being a minority culture or a minority group, is that things get lost to the archives because we weren't in positions of power. And so what are the ways that Hebrew itself, and by extension the people playing this game, are inside of the project of retrojecting, of reading backwards something in order to create a world going forwards in our imaginations.
You're touching on exactly the core kind of thematic problem behind Worlds to Come. Just like, first of all, shout out to my fellow high school Latin nerds. I also took Latin. And like, yes, there is no cultural touch point for second century Jewish life under Roman occupation, even through the medieval era. I have dedicated my life to studying these like canonical sacred texts of Judaism. And even still, when I was researching the history for Worlds to Come, and I'm reading books about like Jews encountering the Romans, and the text brings these Jewish sources, I'm like, that's cool. I love these. But then when the text brings a Roman source, like from Cicero, I like immediately actually have a picture in my head of what Cicero looked like, of the world that he lived in. He's speaking in the Roman Senate. We have all these illustrations. We have what we might call a very full imaginary of what Roman society looked like and felt like. But we don't have that for ancient Judaism. What did the rabbis in the Talmud look like? I don't really know. I can imagine it, but like, it's not out there for us. And we've had to create a lot of that. You and I, Rena Yehuda, have had to create a lot of that ourselves as we're making a book that is trying to bring this world alive for people. These are not dead words on a page. These are the Divrei Elokim Chaim. These are the words of the living God, or the words of the living Jewish people that are in these books. And part of the point of the game and why I set it in this time, second century Roman Palestine, a time where the temple had just been destroyed, where all sorts of Jews are having all sorts of ideas about what Judaism should be, about what the state of the world is. It was a true crisis. What B'nai Lappi, another friend of Judaism Unbound, calls the crash. Like, this is the crash that helps us think about the crash that we are in today. So part of the reason I chose I could have set Worlds to Come in the shtetl. I could have set Worlds to Come in Al-Andalus in Muslim Spain. I could have set Worlds to Come in New York City, in Crown Heights. Like, there's all sorts of places I could have set it in. But one, this is this time, second century, in the land of Israel, is a time that belongs to all Jews, and we can all tell stories about it. And it's also a time when the rabbis didn't have the kind of power or authority that they have for us today. It is a time when everything that being Jewish meant was open for debate, the way that it is today. Getting together to tell stories about this time and to use Hebrew to tell stories about this time, to develop a more robust imagination, not of what this time was actually like. We're not academics. We are players and students, but of what this time could have been if we were there. If I, as a trans lesbian woman who is a rabbinical student and a Jewish professional, had lived at this time, what would I have been like without having to give up any of those parts of myself? I'm a part of bringing that new world of Judaism into being in this imagined story. That helps me imagine what my role is in bringing the next Jewish future into being now, today.
I really agree. And just to like, sometimes when we talk about the first few centuries CE in Jewish life, I think the degree to which Judaism, in quotes, there was no thing called Judaism yet, but the degree to which it was unclear, I really think we talk about it, but it doesn't always soak in. Like, truly, to make this clear, like, what calendar we use. Is it around the sun or the moon or both? When are the holidays? What do we put in our mouths? Like, what do we eat? Is meat and dairy kosher together? Big debate, not obvious the answer to that question. What books do we read and care about? Which ones do we read less and care less about? Truly, we didn't know what Jewish was. I feel like the way Judaism Unbound operates now, where we really assume that nothing is a given in Jewish life, I do think that that's true today. That's why we do what we do. But I think it was more obviously true to Judeans in this time period than it might be to some people today who can fool themselves into thinking, oh, Judaism kind of is set. It's clear what it is. So I wanted to give that context, but now I want us to experience this together. Like, let's play this game. Let's dive in, and Lexi, you'll steer us through. But we're doing something experimental today on the podcast, which is that we're going to actually try this out together. And we don't know where it's going to lead us, but we're going to try it. So, Lexi, can you take us in a little bit to Worlds to Come?
Lex and Rina Yehuda, are you ready to travel back in time to a time that never existed and is about to?
I cannot wait. Let's arrive.
For this demo on this podcast, we're going to play modified rules because I know I'm playing with people who have some Hebrew already, and we're going to use that. We're not going to be afraid to use the knowledge we already have. But when you're playing the game as written at the table, you're going to be drawing cards from a deck that will teach you Hebrew even from the letters and even from starting with 0. So just so you know, this game does not require you to have any Hebrew knowledge and in fact assumes that you know nothing. It's the middle of the night, but you wouldn't know it. You have been tunneling underground for hours. Above you, in a tower of Roman construction, Roman soldiers, the 10th Fretensian Legion, sleeps in their fortress that they have built on the ruined city of Jerusalem. Miles underground, you are following a band of Judean rebels tunneling under the city of Jerusalem, planning a secret night attack against the Roman army that has occupied your holy city. As you tunnel along, you have no idea how long you've been doing this. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you're thrilled. Maybe you're conflicted about the project of war that you've set out to do. All of a sudden, you hear a crash. In front of you, and illuminated by the flickering light of your torches as the dust settles, the path in front of you is covered in rubble. The way forward is blocked, and you realize the lead tunneler is trapped on the other side. You can hear her screams. And this is a wall of rock that's collapsed in front of you. No human power could move this rubble out of the way without risking the integrity of the tunnel. How do you do what's right here?
Are my options to dig out this person who's collapsed on the other side? Is it about taking responsibility for all of the other people who are in my group to make sure that we can get ourselves to safety? What are my options here?
The cool thing about a role-playing game is anything you do is on the table, but let me ask you this. In the best possible world, what would you want the outcome to be?
I would want to make sure that everybody who is in our group is able to be together. I would want to make sure that everybody is alive and safe and okay. And to me, that matters far more than being able to orchestrate the attack. Because if we can't be together as a group, then it's actually not worth it to try and do something that would risk even more lives.
Amazing. Being together and part of the community is more important than victory. Can you think, Rina Yehuda, of 1 or 2 Hebrew words that capture the essence of what you just said? Staying together and saving our lives is more important than victory.
The word that comes to mind is echad, or biyachad, from the root echad, meaning biyachad meaning together, and echad meaning one, or the unity of all things.
Echad biyachad, one together. Beautiful. As you, Rina Yehuda, 2,000 years ago, utter those words in this dark tunnel. Lex, you hear those words being spoken. I am curious, Lex, what do the words echad biyachad mean to you?
Okay, so first off, my relationship to the word echad and biyachad. I mean, yeah, the idea of that which is one, that which is together, that which is sort of cohesively bonded, not separate. All of those are what comes to mind for me when I hear echad and biyachad.
Beautiful. As you, Rina Yehuda and Lex, kind of utter and meditate on the words echad biyachad, one together, the stones that are separating your party, kind of, you hear like at first it's just a small little shaking. You could barely even tell that it's happening, and it gradually grows and builds until, like, miraculously, with no human hands touching these stones at all, the stones part, almost as if the Red Sea is splitting once again to bring us out of Egypt and keep us together. The stones part, and you see on the other side the lead tunneler with her pickaxe, with her torch, amazingly still alight. She is lying on the ground on the other side, shaken up, but alive and well. And you see her on the other side, and the stones part and stand, holding up the tunnel, which would otherwise have collapsed. You kind of hear whispers around you, like, the God of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. It's a miracle. God has blessed our mission today. And as you look through the opening that you've created, you see why the stones collapsed at this particular point. You see that directly in front of you, the path does not yet go forward, but off to the side, you see an entire tunnel snaking down that you did not dig. If you choose to approach this tunnel, there's something about it that you can see that gives you some kind of sense as you shine your torches down this tunnel that kind of goes down deep into the darkness. Something about it gives you the sense that this tunnel was not made by human hands. Do either of you have an idea of what that thing is that lets you know this tunnel was not made by people?
I think there are claw marks along the side. Huge claw marks. Yeah.
Amazing.
Leviathan level claw marks.
Like whole boulders carved out of the way in a single swipe. Brilliant. The people you're with are scared of what this could mean. They don't want to go down. Lex and Rini Huda, what do you want to do?
I want to go in this tunnel. I'm ready to roll into the tunnel, and I am ready to volunteer on behalf of this group that if things go awry, like, my bad, but like, y'all, we gotta try this out. At the very least, it's interesting, and at most, there's something that could be gained.
I am firmly against going down into this unknown tunnel into the bowels of the earth, abandoning the mission and potentially getting swallowed whole by what seems like a very, very large and perhaps unknowable creature. But I do respect the fact that the other half of the party seems really, really interested in figuring out what this huge beast is.
If I'm going down, let's go down fighting a Leviathan. That sounds like a great way to go out.
What happens to the Romans? Like net zero for the rest of the Jews.
I know. I got distracted from that mission, but this is very exciting.
I'll stay here, and I will and you can. We'll thread a rope down, and then if you are really in trouble, you should tug the rope, and we'll pull you out. We'll be recon.
Amazing. As the two of you are arguing, you hear from deep within the tunnel words echoing up. And as they kind of bounce off the walls, reverberate off of the monstrously large claw marks and reach your ears, you discern the words Mashiv Haruach. Mashiv Haruach. Lex and Rini Huda, do you recognize those words from somewhere in Jewish life?
Yeah, I recognize that from liturgy. Usually I am used to hearing Geshem after it. It's related to calls for rain and certain times of year where we call for rain and certain times of year where we don't. So I won't translate the two words word by word, but that's my first association.
As this image of rain, Lex, comes into your head, you feel on your hand a droplet of rain that chills the bones in your body. And suddenly a downpour for just 1 second falls on you in the middle of this cave. It's not possible by nature, but a downpour falls on you and puts out your torches. And you hear a chuckle from the depths of this cave that goes, and as you stand on the precipice of this cave, facing who knows what monster at the bottom that has the same miraculous powers of Hebrew that you do, but is willing to use them against the people, we'll pause the game there and leave it on a cliffhanger.
Whoa.
Oh, wow. What a story.
All I'll say is amazing cliffhanger. We both want to
Excellent
play
cliffhanger.
more. And I'm going to commit on the air that in our Discord, we will create some way for people to continue this specific flow of the story, and we'll have fun together.
Hell yeah. I'm totally down to do a play-by-post Discord server. Join the Discord. We'll all be Roman. We'll all be Jewish rebels fighting against the Roman Empire, and who knows what lurks under the depths of Jerusalem together.
I had a lot of fun. I can feel the way that in this game it is truly worlds plural. That there are so many different stories that we could be adventuring inside of. And I could also feel the way that even talking about language in this context, or using these words and asking people to create these emotional story-based meanings as their connection to Hebrew, creates actually the whole world that is contained inside of biblical Hebrew that's often lost to Hebrew school or to academic environments. It breathes something that is alive back into a language that we often consider to be dead, or isn't spoken in quite the same way and therefore is categorized as a dead language. But we know that Hebrew is really anything but. As you were telling the story of this game, I started thinking of a different story. That's one of my favorite stories about the relationship between words and worlds. It's a story of the Baal Shem Tov, who is the founder of the Hasidic movement, about the Baal Shem Tov walking through the marketplace with many of his disciples. And as they're walking through the marketplace, they're passing stalls of spices, and they're passing the butcher shop, and they pass by a fishmonger. In front of that stall, the merchant is having an argument with one of the customers. And it's getting quite loud, and the group of the Baal Shem and his students have sort of stopped. The students are starting to stop and stare, and, you know, they want the gossip of the day. We're all interested in the gossip. And as they're standing there listening to this argument, it gets louder and louder and more aggressive, until finally the merchant shouts at the customer, "I'm going to gut you like a fish." And at that point, the Baal Shem Tov says, "All right, we've had enough." He takes his disciples and he says, we're gonna walk along, stop staring. This is uncouth for students. Come over here to this other part of the market. And he gathers them around in a circle. And he says, you're going to all put your hands on each other's shoulders. And they put their hands on each other's shoulders. He says, close your eyes. And they close their eyes. And he closes the circuit by clasping his hands over the shoulders of the disciples next to him. Suddenly, all of them, in their mind's eye, are broadcasted this horrible vision of the merchant truly gutting the customer like a fish. And the students begin to scream. They say, please, don't let us see any more of this horrible vision. Finally, the Baal Shem Tov relents, and he takes his hands off the shoulders of his students, and they recover themselves, blinking into the daylight. And the Baal Shem Tov turns to them and says, the reason I have showed you this horrible thing is not to torment you, but to help you understand that everything you say, the words that you speak, just like God spoke in order to create the world, so too, the words that you speak create worlds elsewhere. That man saying that he will gut someone else like a fish in a different realm of creation, that is actually happening. And so you must guard your tongue. You must be thoughtful and wise and kind in the way that you speak in order to create worlds that actually reflect the realities that we wish to create. And it feels like having all of these people playing this game and the echoes that creates feels like we are truly creating more and more worlds by telling more and more stories. It really feels like there's a meta element to this, which is you're not just creating a world by being inside of the game, but if we actually take the message of that story to heart in a real Jewish understanding of metaphysics, truly we are creating worlds by playing a game and by telling these stories.
I mean, that is so much exactly the perfect story to capture what the Jewishness of this game is. Our words matter, and they create worlds. So let's imagine better worlds, or let's imagine worse worlds and learn from them. And just to reflect a couple things that happened, even in this short modified version of the game we just played, there were so many amazing things. Like, first of all, when I was like, let's stop playing, the looks on your faces, they're like, no, we want to keep living in this world and find out what happens next. The way, like, Rina Yehuda, that you expressed a truth you believe while playing this game that I think is not fully in character, but also reflects something true about you, that it's better for us to stay together and it's worth sacrificing a victory over other people for us to be all one. I mean, right? You articulated that, and maybe that's a character thing, but I think not.
I felt a little psychoanalyzed actually in the moment. It was pleasurable, but a little exposing.
and there is a kind of vulnerability that the game invites us to have, and that it's safe because, I mean, I'm saying to you right now, I think that was you actually, but because it's safe to do as a group of players because we're playing characters. It's not actually me who's praying, echad b'yachad. It's my character who wants us all to stay together and is willing to give up the mission. But also, like, just to notice, like, sure, I was quote unquote the teacher. I was kind of quote unquote leading this experience, but I never told you what any of the words that you said in Hebrew mean. You decided that for each other. Echad b'yachad, the two of you said that means together as one. For Mashiv Haruach, we actually never said what those words literally mean.
Yeah, I was going to go to that. Yeah.
But to you, what those words mean, the impact that they have on you is this prayer for rain. And so that's what happened in the game world. The words Mashiv Haruach mean who makes the wind blow. It's the idea like God makes the wind blow and the wind brings the rain down.
Who returns the wind. It relates to the word, the sheav part relates to the word teshuva that people understand as return. Like, it's an interesting linguistic claim, like implicit claim of the liturgy that one is returning wind as opposed to making wind. God returning the wind, like you're talking about what God is here, and it's saying God returns the wind. That is different than making the wind. A lot of prayer books translate it as who makes the wind blow. It's not quite what it says, and it opens the door for theologies where the wind is not created by God. Anyway, like that can all emerge when you look closely at the words. We didn't look at that. We looked at Morid Hagashem, who makes rain fall. That was just sort of where my heart took us, I guess.
Right. No, but what's amazing about this game and why I knew you would love it is that what you just said is not a side point in Worlds to Come. If we were playing the full version of the game, like the demon goes Mashiv Haruach, and you're like, well, that makes and you're like, well, that makes the rain come down. Then you, as the angels in the game, would be like, actually, that means return the rain. And then the rain goes, and that means return the wind. And then the wind goes like down the tunnel and like messes up the demon, or I don't know what would happen. But actually part of the game is to say like, every single word in Hebrew can mean so many different things. And like, is the mashiv in that prayer like from the root shuv, meaning return? Is it from nashav, meaning blow? And now we've learned two different shorishes, two different Hebrew verb roots, and we got to like ruin an evil demon's day. Like, how cool is that? We actually get to have these really interesting debates and arguments and raise, and not just like debate to have a debate, but like to raise the multiplicity and the many-meaningedness of the Hebrew language that reflects the multiplicity and the many-meaningedness of Judaism that was alive at the time, that is alive for us today. And like, just for people listening to the podcast, like now you just learned 4 Hebrew words. Echad, b'yachad, mashiv, haruach. Like you learned all these things, one together, blow, return, wind, rain, and there's a whole story attached to them. So much learning about the language, about Judaism, about ourselves just happened because I was like, what do you do when the tunnel collapses?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. And this was super fun, and I want to return us full circle a little bit to where we started, which this has been sort of a very, I don't know, affirmation voice. I'm like breaking the fourth wall of the podcast. I think about affirmation voice and challenge voice. Like when we ask questions, sometimes we're like very actively affirming the work of a guest, and sometimes we're like, but what about this? And challenge voice. I want to bring us back to the challenge voice of like what's wrong in Jewish life, where us doing this felt like deeply different from what one would usually expect in Jewish gathering spaces and Jewish educational spaces, because I really think it's actually strange that we've gotten to that place. Like when you when you back out for a second and you look at, say, Passover, I mean, we were talking about parting like the Red Sea, like the Sea of Reeds. Like we have, the Passover story. There's an argument that the Passover Seder is a kind of tabletop role-playing game. Like you are Avadim Hayinu, like we are inhabiting a role. We are understanding ourselves as slaves in Egypt thousands of years ago, whether it's literal thousands of years ago time or sort of a mythical time, because many of us don't think it literally happened. But we are inhabiting a story. We are inhabiting a role at a table. There is a lot of gameplay and structure and rules to it. You literally have a scavenger hunt towards the end where it's like, why are we doing that? I guess it's a mini game. This is actually right there in front of us in some of our Jewish tradition. And I think the fact that we've meandered to this universe where what it is to participate in Jewish life is largely not to screw around and play and have fun. And also, yeah, you're learning in the process. Like, that's weird. We should like denormalize that and extra normalize the gameplay. Like we live in an inverted Purim world where playing and messing around with Jewish tradition is somehow radical, and just like dressing up nice and sitting with proper posture in our Jewish spaces is good. And so as we close, I kind of wanted to bring it back to there and ask you to give us a prophetic call for like, what can this mean for the Jewish world more broadly if we inhabit the worlds of this game, but also the meta world that the game is seeking to create as well?
One of the things that saddens me the most about the Judaism that I live in is that there is no fool character. There is no model out there for us to imagine, like, here's a Jew who like plays around and breaks boundaries and like mocks the king and makes us reflect on our shadow sides. That is what the fool does. That is what play and what Purim are all about. And we just like, we love the table and a tabletop role-playing game, but we are leaving that on the table untouched. A lot of like institutional Jewish life is not engaging with this play side, which is actually like half of our humanity, half of what makes us people. Is this boundary pushing? Is this, well, I'm going to laugh at the authority and then also like be part of the authority's circle. We're missing the pushback from within in a lot of how we think about Judaism today. And that's like a real problem. And it's why we're seeing this huge explosion of all sorts of weird Jewish things happening outside of the institutional Jewish life. There is nowhere for us to be a fool, for us to be weird, for us to play. When you go to shul, exactly like you said, you got to dress up, you got to sit in the right spot, you got to not talk during prayers, you got to be nice and kind and like not cause a ruckus. But like, just to bring one example from history, like in like medieval Ashkenaz in Europe, like there was a whole thing called Ikuv HaTfilah, of like stopping the prayers, or like someone had a problem with someone else in the community, you would like get up in the middle of services and stop everything and say, I am not going to let this Torah service finish until you guy like pay me back what I'm owed, or until
we will turn this
respect.
prayer car around.
That's
Bring
right.
back brawling in the middle of shul.
Right. And now it's like, oh, well, we would never do that. That would be so disrespectful to the Torah. And like, if like the 15th century Jews were like, yes, it is worth stopping this thing that brings us together as a community, for us to like have these arguments out, then yeah, like how could we say that we're better than them? I also just want to shout out, like, I'm not the first person to think of Jewish play in this way. Like Lex, you mentioned the Passover Seder. There is a role-playing game called Manishtana by Gabriel Rabinowitz and Ben Bizagno that makes the Passover Seder into a tabletop role-playing game where you're like, you're Moshe, you're Miriam, you're telling the story of the Exodus together. And like, that exists. Maybe we should all be playing that game at our Passover Seders. I think many of us have so much anger, resentment, a feeling of isolation being cast out from Judaism because we're the weirdos, we're the freaks. We are people who have different values, who see us going the wrong direction, and nobody in our Jewish communities wanted to hear it. And so we're making our own things. Like reading Yehuda brought us those prophetic words, echad b'yachad. If we're all gonna come together as a people, as a Jewish people, as the human people on earth, and try to bring a world to come where we are all together, where we are all more free, where we are all more playful, and can bring all the strangeness, all the fun that is in our hearts and shine with that light. Like, we've got to be able to play in our Judaism. We got to be able to play with our Judaism. We have to be willing to take that risk of like, I'm on this party that's trying to like subvert the Romans in the city, but like, I actually don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of this, and I'm here with it. So what role? So like, but I'm going to stand in that. Maybe I'm going to stop the party as we're tunneling and be like, this is not right. Maybe you're going to get to the bottom of that tunnel, like whatever monster is down there, you're going to be like, let's play together, you and me, the monster, and see what comes out of that. There's so many worlds that we can bring. All we have to do is let ourselves imagine them. Not just imagine them in our heads alone, but imagine them at a table together. Imagine them on a Zoom room together. Imagine them sending letters back and forth through the mail together. When we can start talking to each other and giving each other these playful ideas, some of them will go somewhere. Some of them will just be sparks and compost that lead to the new thing. We've got to be having these kinds of playful conversations, because what play means is it's not about right or wrong. It's not about kosher, not kosher. It's not about correct and incorrect. It's about fun. It's about not fun. It's about imagining things together. It's about telling new stories and just seeing what happens and letting a new world emerge. And if we can't do that at our tables playing a game, we're not going to have the muscle. We're not going to have the skill to do that at our synagogues, at our protests, at our board meetings, at our shared meals, or on the streets.
I'm going to close with a little Lex Hebrew English Drash. Play in English, read not play, but rather pele, which means miracle or wonder. It's one of the words that we have for when the miraculous happens. We need to bring the play back into Judaism, which is to say we need to find more miracles in our Jewish practice and live them and embody them. Thank you so much, Lexi Kohanski, for joining us in this conversation and for being part of our Judaism Unbound staff team.
Thanks so much, Lex and Rena Yehuda, for having me, for playing with me, and for opening up some new worlds, some new possibilities.
And thanks so much to all of you out there for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and we hope that you'll tune in again in the future. As we close, first and foremost, we really want to encourage you to follow Worlds to Come. You can do so by heading to the Kickstarter. That link is in the show notes to this episode. If you want to support this game financially, help get the book printed, the deck printed, all of the different pieces that will help this game come to life, follow the Kickstarter. You'll be notified of all the different ways you can be supportive, and you'll get to see just really cool updates from Lexi Kohanski as this game grows closer to being released to the world. So again, the show notes of this episode is where you can find the link to do all of that. Another reminder, courses in the Onion Yeshiva. You can sign up for them. 3-week deep dives, just 3 session classes that you can sign up for in the month of Elul leading into the new Jewish year. You can register by heading to judaismunbound.com/classes. There's amazing options on Jewish time travel, on prominent woman characters from the Torah and Haftorah readings of Rosh Hashanah, and an incredible class grounded in theology exploring the question of whether God is or is not to be compared to a king, something that happens a lot in our high holiday liturgy. Again, judaismunbound.com/classes. Financial aid is available for all of these classes in the Onion Yeshiva. A final reminder, and then we'll close things out just by encouraging you to be in touch with us. You can attend and be super raucous and supportive at our graduation ceremony for the students completing the certificate program of the Onion Yeshiva. So head to judaismunbound.com/certificate, click the big button, and attend our graduation ceremony this Sunday, August 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And now, as promised, here are all the ways you can be in touch with us. There's our Facebook and Instagram. Our handles are at Judaism Unbound. You can head to our website, JudaismUnbound.com, to learn more about our work. And you can email us at hosts, HOSTS, at JudaismUnbound.com. That'll reach both Rini Yehuda and me. Given that we mentioned our Discord in this episode, we'll also plug that you can join our Discord at discord.judaismunbound.com. Continue the amazing world we started to create earlier in this podcast episode, and also dive into all sorts of other conversations with Unbounders located all around the world. So thank you so much, as always, for listening. And with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.